We're here with Ian Forrester of the BBC, and he's going to be one of the presenters at this year's MozFest in the creative AI space. Ian, thank you so much for coming by or agreeing to this interview virtually. I do appreciate it a lot.
No
Um,
problem. Thank you for having me.
you're in Manchester, right?
I am in Manchester, UK. Yes.
Okay, and that's where the BBC has its has an R&D center, right?
Yeah. So R&D split. Excuse me. R&D split between London and Manchester. We do have other little bits, but those are the main centers.
Okay. And you're going to be presenting a really interesting session at MozFest this year on the future of podcasting. And maybe you can explain some of the stuff that you're working on, because when I came across it originally, I was just absolutely blown away by the idea of what you're working on. And maybe you can explain it for the audience.
Yeah. I also do a kind of quite bad job when I listen back to the way I explain it. But I would say there's two ways to look at it. So technically, what we're able to do is rather than a podcast right now, you download the file and it just plays back. Now, the devices that we're playing back these podcasts on have got so much more smarter,
Mhm.
and that device has so many sensors, so much data, so much computational power that it could do a lot more, but we're not using it that way. So what we've been doing is going, right, okay, let's deliver it as a podcast, but rather than a completed, flattened piece of audio, how about if we deliver the objects or the audio objects in pieces and then an instruction set
Mhm.
so that it can then pull it together. So it's more like HTML and the web. It's like you deliver the web page and then the web page pulls in the JavaScript or it pulls in the images and stuff like that. And because you're able to do this live on the device, then you can do other things like this device is by a Pashto speaker. Because the Pashto speaker then use the soundtrack, which Pashto instead of English, for example. You know, it's stuff like that you can do. There's a
Okay.
lot more things you could do, but the important thing for us is that what can you do from a storytelling point of view, and that's where the second point of view comes. Where if you look at the way that stories have developed over time, what we've done is we've basically kind of moved to the published world, and then we went to broadcast, and we're doing this single story to everyone. And actually, if we look way back in the past, we used to be able to tell stories which adapt and change based on context, based on all these different things. So one of the things you would do is if you are talking to young people, you most likely wouldn't swear.
Mhm.
But if you're talking to adults, you might swear to emphasize certain things. And
Mhm.
these are the adaptations that we do, and they're very human. So
In some ways, I mean, it sounds almost like in DJing, where you have stem files, multi tracks where you can just jump in between the tracks on the fly. Is that a rough idea of what it's like?
it's so funny you say that. So stems is something that I've been very interested in. So I also have DJed quite a lot. So I'm holding this thing called a pacemaker, which is I DJ on, and I've DJed at Mozfest quite a few times, for about 6 or 7 times. Yeah, so the thing about stems is really interesting because stems are, they're kind of like these different, yeah, they're these different tracks almost.
Yeah.
So one of the things you can do is you could use it like stems,
Mhm.
or you can go one step further, which is that these are almost objects and they get called independently at any time.
Ah,
And you can do things to those objects. You don't have to play it through. You could play it at a slower speed or layer them up, loads of them side by side. So, for example, we've got a demo where it will play up to 160 audio objects at the exact same time,
wow.
and you can do things to those objects as well. Say, this object plays 2 seconds after this other object has started, or 5 seconds after this one.
Mhm.
So that's that. Yeah, it is a bit. The stems mentality is actually really interesting, and it's a good way of thinking about it. But we can do a little bit more than that.
One of the things that you were doing in the Skillshare that you had in December for the MozFest organizers was that you were also doing things that were location dependent. Um,
Yes.
so maybe that's one of those things, right?
Yeah. So this is what's interesting about all of this, right? So the you got this whole engine which is like like a STEM engine where you're adapting and changing the audio on the fly, and also we can do binaural audio, not in real time, but if if it's recorded in binaural, we can play it back in binaural, and you can start to put other layers on top of that. So we've not tried putting binaural on top of binaural and see what happens, but we
Oh,
could do that. That'll be easy enough to do.
sure.
So you have this shifting sound field which is happening. But the other thing you could do is you got the elements of like, okay, based on time of day, based on location, based on is the person's phone in their pocket or is the phone out in the open? Is the phone on speakerphone? All those kind of things can suddenly adapt and change what you're hearing. So you got this kind of like unlimited possibilities,
Yeah.
and that's quite liberating. But also it's kind of like, where do I even start? Now the location thing is something that people always talk about. This kind of like road trip, or you're on your way to somewhere, and then it knows where you are, so it then plays certain things at certain times,
Hmm.
and that's easy. That's easily possible. But I think the important thing is to try and craft it all together, so it doesn't sound like it's all right, you just walk past this statue. This statue is this, da, 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 da,
Right.
Oh, and then go to the next one. It's kind of like, how can you craft it all together so it seems seamless?
One of
I
the
guess
use
that's the art of
cases,
storytelling.
yeah. Well, one of the use cases though that you were talking about was like a radio drama, right?
Yeah.
And so,
So,
go ahead. Sorry.
so there's a few use cases, and so a radio drama was one that we've been thinking about. So, we we're not going to do this, but if you look at the War of the Worlds original radio drama, you know
Orson
that
Welles,
scared a lot of people.
1938.
Yep,
Yeah.
that scared a lot of people, and you can imagine something where not only is it playing this audio and it's doing this story, but it's also making references to things that are in your area or on your street, you know, or based on the time of day as well, because you also can combine these things.
Mhm.
Then you got the kind of like, it's dark and they're walking down this road, and this is what's kind of happening in this road, for example, stuff like that.
But
Yeah.
wouldn't someone have to record all of that stuff in advance? I mean, that seems like a tremendous workload for a person in a studio.
So yeah, so one of the things that it also does, and I'm glad you reminded me of this, because it seems so obvious now, so kind of easy, but it does text to speech.
Aha.
So it will say, so you can literally write in text in the podcast, and it will say those out loud. And depending on the speech engine on your phone, it can sound very realistic, or it can sound like speech JS,
Right. Right.
So yeah, you can get something a bit more like a Siri or a Google Now voice or something like that. You get something that's kind of somewhat believable. So
Excellent.
no recording needed.
That would save a lot of time then, and I mean also open up a lot of different possibilities. Things like live feeds from the weather or any number of different inputs. Um,
Yes.
so what is the software called, or what's the name of the project? I mean,
Yeah, so it used to be called Perceptive Podcasts.
mhm.
There's a whole story why it's called Perceptive, but we now call it Adaptive Podcasting. So it's still in its early stages. Like I literally was just talking to a developer who's working on a version which will then go on the Play Store as a beta. But yeah, it's still kind of it's still kind of making its way into the mainstream. But the key thing, and I think this is an important part, is that all the stuff that we're doing, we're making to be open sourced. We're not going to kind of have it ourselves, and then everyone kind of like is kind of like licensing it from us or buying it from us. Part of the BBC agenda as a public service broadcaster is to kind of um, enable all people to be able to create and explore their own creativity.
Mhm.
So one of the things that we're doing is we're working with young people, and so, for example, one of the things that we're interested in is some of the things, some of the cases that we wouldn't think about. So, for example, pirate radio station. So, pirate radio station exists in a certain area. I used to listen to it when I was younger. You can imagine something where you listen to a podcast, and then during the day it sounds like a normal radio station, and then when you at night and in a certain location, then that's when it really opens up and like
Oh,
you
wow.
really explore what's really going on in this podcast, you know. So stuff like that, you could do.
It sounds like that's where also AI could really, or some kind of machine learning could really step in as well. And
Yes, absolutely.
yeah. So the name of the session at MozFest is "The Future of Podcasting is Adaptive, Open, and Data Ethical." Um,
Yes.
what's the data ethical part? What's that about?
Yeah, so it's really important to us as a BBC. We got a bunch of projects, and a whole work stream which is very much about um, providing a more ethical stance on the use of data. So if you've got an application which can use your location, use the fact your phone is in your pocket, use the fact that you are walking, the fact you're going on a certain bus, all those kind of things, that's not something that you want to share with the BBC,
Hmm.
and you should never have to unless you want to. So as default, the application uses this data, but it stays on the phone. It never leaves the phone. It's really important to us that if you are using this locational data or using other kinds of data, then all that data stays on the phone
Hmm.
and never gets shared. So one of the things that there's some limitations to this, right? So um, we we've gotten a use case where you are on your journey to work. And so it would know where your work is, it knows where you are, it knows as you're walking or you're in the car or on the train or whatever, it knows how close you are to work. To do that, and we've got the code for it, it needs to ping the Google GeoIP, sorry, geolocation services,
Hmm.
and then kind of say, I'm here, how far until I get to here? Now, that for most people is not a big deal, but that's something that we've chosen to not include. Now, when we open source it, we'll go, here's the code for that,
Hmm.
but we've never included it in the application because we want to protect the users so that they're not kind of giving away this information, which is quite private, And other people find other things more private than others, but it's something that we've had to make a stance on. We want to focus on the kind of storytelling
Hmm.
and not on uses of data because, for example, if you were an advertiser, that stuff is really gold.
It's great though that you've built that into the architecture from the beginning, because also that's something that others could possibly build on as well to enhance privacy and trust rather than trying to fix it after the fact.
Yes, yeah, I think that's the thing we've always tried to do is rather than let's make this thing, oh, we should think about privacy. It's like no, this is built in from the very beginning. So some of the experiments we've done before have started to unpick some of this,
Mhm.
and it became very clear that if you're going to install that application on someone's phone, that we really need to be not using that data and sharing that data elsewhere. I wouldn't want. I've got the phone. I've got the app on my phone, on my own personal phone. I'm a work phone.
Mhm.
If I knew it was using data and even sending it back to the BBC, I wouldn't be that happy with it. I would want to restrict that. And as default, the restrictions are it won't do that. Really important for us.
Excellent. So once again, the name of the session is "The Future of Podcast is Adaptive, Open, and Data Ethical." Ian Forrester of BBC R&D, thank you so much for this. This is absolutely wonderful. I'm really looking forward to the session and seeing what the participants can possibly also do with it in the session. But thanks again for this, and we'll see you at MozFest.
Thank you very much.